One cowboy held her close and said, "You're home." She arrived hurt, unwanted, and terrified. The bus doors opened with a long, tired sigh, and Clara stepped down onto the cracked concrete as if she wasn't sure the ground would hold her. The sky above the small Texas town was painted in deep orange and soft pink, the kind of sunset people usually stop to admire. But Clara did not look up. Her eyes stayed low, focused on her worn shoes and the thin layer of dust that moved across the ground with the evening wind. Too quiet. There were no crowds rushing home, no loud voices calling out names. Just an old bench, a flickering light above the entrance, and a vending machine humming to itself near the wall. The bus driver placed her small bag beside her and gave her a quick nod before climbing back inside. The doors shut. The engine roared. And just like that, the bus pulled away, leaving her standing alone. She did not wave goodbye. She had nowhere to go back to. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, even though the air was still warm. It wasn't the cold that made her shake. It was the feeling of not belonging anywhere. Her bag was light because she owned very little. A few clothes. A photo of her mother, folded inside a book. Some coins at the bottom of her pocket. That was all. Her name was Claire Mitchell. She was 19 years old, but life had already pressed hard against her shoulders. There was a faint bruise near her temple, hidden under strands of brown hair. It was turning yellow now, slowly fading. She hoped it would disappear completely soon. She was tired of carrying marks that told stories she did not want to explain. The town looked small enough to walk across in 15 minutes. A grocery store stood on one corner. A diner with a bright red sign sat across the street. A few trucks were parked along the road. People moved slowly here. No one seemed to be in a hurry. That made her feel even more out of place. In the city she had left behind, everything moved fast. Cars, people, noise, arguments, especially arguments. Her stepfather's voice had filled every corner of that small house for years. Sharp words, heavy silence afterward. Her mother had once been the soft place in that home, the gentle voice that made everything feel safe. But after her mother passed away, the house changed. It became colder, not because of the temperature, but because kindness slowly disappeared. At first, Clara tried to adjust. She stayed quiet. She kept her grades high. She cleaned the kitchen before being asked. She told herself that if she just tried harder, things would get better. They didn't. She learned how to move through rooms without making sound. She learned how to keep her eyes down. She learned how to swallow her feelings before they turned into tears. But some days the air inside that house felt too heavy to breathe. The night she left, there was no dramatic moment, no loud goodbye, just a final argument that echoed longer than the others, words that made her feel smaller than she already felt. When the house finally went quiet, she packed her bag with shaking hands. She did not leave a note. She did not think anyone would look for one. The bus ticket had taken almost all her savings. She didn't even care where the bus was going, she just needed distance. And now distance had brought her here. A truck engine rumbled somewhere nearby, pulling her back to the present. She lifted her head slowly. Across the small parking area stood an old pickup truck, dusty but strong-looking. Leaning against it was a tall man wearing a faded cowboy hat. His arms were crossed loosely over his chest. He wasn't staring in a rude way. He simply seemed to be observing the quiet scene around him. Clara quickly looked away. She had learned not to invite attention. A woman walked out of the diner carrying a pie box and glanced at Clara for a moment longer than necessary. Two teenage boys laughed as they passed by on bicycles, whispering to each other. In a town this small, a stranger was obvious. Clara picked up her bag and moved toward the bench near the station wall. She sat down slowly, her body stiff from hours on the bus. The seat was hard, but she barely noticed. Her mind was racing. What now? She had not thought this part through. She had imagined stepping off the bus and feeling free. Instead, she felt exposed. The sky was getting darker by the minute. The light above the station flickered again, buzzing softly. She checked her pocket. A few coins. Not enough for a motel. Not enough for much of anything. The wind lifted her hair slightly, revealing the fading bruise near her temple. She quickly tucked her hair behind her ear, hoping no one noticed. She didn't want questions. She didn't want sympathy either. She just wanted space to breathe. Across the lot, the man by the truck was still there. He had not left. He seemed in no rush. He glanced toward her once, then looked away as if giving her room. That small act, pretending not to stare, felt strangely kind. Clara pressed her lips together. She had promised herself she would not trust easily again. Trust had only led to disappointment before, but she also knew she could not sit on that bench all night. A memory flashed in her mind. her mother's voice soft and warm, telling her when she was younger, no matter how dark things get, Clara, there is always one good door somewhere. You just have to be brave enough to knock. Clara swallowed hard. Was this town a door? Or just another hallway leading nowhere? A car drove past slowly, its headlights sweeping across her face for a second before moving on. She felt small under that bright light, like someone caught in the middle of a stage without knowing her lines. She stood up suddenly, her legs slightly weak from sitting too long. She could not stay frozen. Even if she was afraid, she had to move. The diner's red sign glowed warmly across the street. Maybe she could ask if they needed help washing dishes. Maybe they would let her work for a meal. She had never been too proud to work. She took one step forward, then another. Her bag felt heavier now, even though nothing inside had changed. Each step felt like walking into the unknown. But she reminded herself that staying in the past had hurt more. Behind her, the truck engine started. She paused for a second, but did not turn around. She did not want to assume anything. The engine idled, then quieted again. Maybe he had only been adjusting something. The town clock near the grocery store chimed softly, marking the hour. Evening had fully settled in. She was alone. She was tired. She was uncertain. But she was also still standing. And even though she felt unwanted in the place she had left behind, she refused to believe that she had no value at all. Somewhere inside her, beneath the fear and the doubt, there was still a small spark of hope. It was fragile, like a tiny flame in the wind, but it was there. As she stepped off the curb and began walking toward the diner's warm light, she had no idea that this quiet town, this dusty parking lot, and the silent man near the old truck were about to become part of a new chapter in her life. She thought she had reached the end of her road. She did not know she was standing at the beginning of something she had never dared to imagine. Clara had almost reached the diner door when she heard slow footsteps behind her. They were not rushed, not heavy, just steady. She stopped. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her small bag. For a second, her old fear returned, rising quickly like a shadow at her back. She told herself not to panic. Not everyone meant harm. Not every step behind her was danger. "Miss," a calm voice said. It was deep, but gentle. She turned slowly. The tall man from the pickup truck stood a few feet away. Up close, she noticed the lines on his face, shaped by sun and years of hard work. His eyes were steady, not sharp. He kept a respectful distance, as if careful not to crowd her. "You look like you just got off that bus," he said simply. She nodded. Words felt heavy in her throat. "You got somewhere to stay tonight?" The question made her stomach twist. She didn't want to admit the truth. But lying would not help either. "No," she answered quietly. He studied her for a moment, not in a judging way, just thoughtful. The diner light reflected off his worn boots. Now, even though he didn't look rich. He didn't look fancy. Just solid, like someone who belonged to the land around him. "I'm Daniel Hayes," he said. "I've got a ranch a few miles outside town." He continued, "You can stay in the guest room for a night or two. No charge. Just until you figure things out." Her heart began to race again. It sounded too easy. Nothing in her life had been easy lately. "I don't have money," she repeated, almost as if warning him. "I didn't ask for any," he replied. There was no irritation in his voice. No pressure. Just a simple statement. She searched his face for signs of hidden meaning. A smirk. A strange look. Anything that told her this was a mistake, but she found none. Behind them, the diner door opened and laughter spilled onto the sidewalk. A couple walked out, glancing at Clara curiously before heading to their car. The town was watching, even if pretending not to. Daniel shifted his weight slightly. "You don't have to decide right now," he said, "but it'll be dark soon. And this town doesn't have many places open late." She knew he was right. The coins in her pocket wouldn't get her far, and sleeping on that bench was not an option she wanted to think about. Still, trusting a stranger felt like stepping onto thin ice. "Why?" she asked softly. He seemed surprised by the question. "Why? What? Why help me?" He looked toward the horizon for a moment before answering. "Because someone should." No long speech, no dramatic explanation, just because someone should. Something inside her shifted. It wasn't full trust, but it was enough to take a small step. He nodded once. "Okay." He simply turned and walked back toward his truck, assuming she would follow. She hesitated for half a second, then moved behind him. The truck was old but clean. The passenger door creaked slightly as he opened it for her. She climbed in carefully, placing her bag on her lap. The inside smelled like leather and fresh hay. There were no loud decorations, just a radio, a small cross hanging from the mirror, and a pair of work gloves resting on the dashboard. Daniel started the engine. They drove in silence at first. The town lights faded behind them as they moved onto a long stretch of road surrounded by open land. The sky above was now deep blue, with the first stars beginning to appear. Clara kept her eyes on the window. The wide fields looked endless. It felt strange after years of crowded buildings and narrow streets. "You from the city?" Daniel asked after a while. "Yes." He nodded. "Big change." "Yes." He didn't ask more, and she appreciated that. The road turned to gravel, and the truck bounced slightly. In the distance, she saw a wooden fence stretching across the land. Beyond it stood a house with warm yellow lights glowing from the windows. A barn sat to the side, and she could make out the shapes of horses moving slowly near the fence. Her chest tightened, but not from fear this time. It looked peaceful. Too peaceful. The truck stopped in front of the house. The engine went quiet, leaving only the sound of crickets and the soft rustle of wind through grass. Daniel stepped out first and walked around to her side. He opened the door again without a word. She climbed down carefully, her legs slightly shaky. The air smelled different here. Clean. Earthy. Real. "This way," he said, leading her up the small wooden steps to the porch. The house wasn't large, but it felt steady, the kind of place built with strong hands and honest effort. Inside, the floorboards creaked softly under their steps. "You hungry?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He moved into the kitchen and pulled out a simple meal: bread, warm soup, and a glass of water. Nothing fancy, but more than she had expected. She sat at the small wooden table, unsure if she should begin. "Go ahead," he said. The warmth spread through her body almost instantly. She hadn't realized how hungry she truly was until that moment. Daniel stayed busy at the counter, giving her space. He didn't watch her eat. He didn't make her feel examined. After she finished, he showed her down a short hallway. "This is the guest room," he said, opening the door. The room was simple. A small bed with a clean quilt, a wooden dresser, a window looking out toward the fields. It was more than she had hoped for. "There are fresh towels in the bathroom," he added. "Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning." She stood in the doorway, unsure what to say. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a short nod. "You're safe here." The words settled over her like a blanket. Safe. It had been a long time since she felt that word fit her life. After he walked away, she stepped fully into the room and closed the door gently. She placed her bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped slightly under her weight. For a moment, she just sat there, listening. No shouting, no heavy footsteps pacing outside her door. Just quiet. She lay down slowly, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day replayed in her mind. The bus ride, the empty station, the stranger with steady eyes. Maybe she didn't know if this was temporary or the start of something new, but for the first time in months, her body began to relax. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes, silent and soft, not from sadness alone, but from exhaustion, from relief, from not having to defend herself for one single night. Outside her window, the wind moved gently across the fields, and in the quiet of that small ranch house, Clara drifted into the deepest sleep she had known in a very long time. Clara woke before the sun fully rose. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. The room was quiet, filled with soft gray morning light. She lay still, listening carefully. No shouting. No doors slamming, no heavy footsteps in the hallway, only the distant sound of a rooster and the gentle rustle of wind outside the window. She slowly sat up in the small bed. The quilt was still wrapped around her shoulders. For the first time in a long while, she had slept through the night without waking up from sudden fear. That alone felt strange. She swung her feet onto the wooden floor and stood carefully. Her body felt sore from the bus ride and the stress of the past weeks, but something inside her felt lighter. She walked to the window and looked outside. The ranch stretched wide under the early morning sky. A thin layer of mist hovered above the grass. Horses stood near the fence, calm and still. The barn door was open, and she could see movement inside. Daniel was already awake. Of course he was. Clara changed into one of her clean shirts and tied her hair back. She washed her face in the small bathroom, staring at her reflection for a long moment. The bruise near her temple had faded more. It no longer looked dark and painful. Just a faint reminder. She took a deep breath and stepped out into the hallway. The house smelled like coffee and something warm cooking. She followed the scent into the kitchen. Daniel stood near the stove, flipping something in a pan. He glanced over when he heard her footsteps, but did not look surprised. Morning, he said simply. Morning, she replied, her voice still soft from sleep. Hope you slept all right. She nodded. I did. Thank you. He gestured toward the table. Sit. Breakfast is almost ready? He hesitated. Part of her still felt unsure about accepting kindness. But she sat down slowly. He placed a plate in front of her. Eggs, toast, and a small bowl of fruit. A glass of water sat beside it. You don't have to rush off anywhere today, he said as he sat across from her. We'll figure things out step by step. Step by step. That sounded better than trying to plan her entire life at once. After they finished eating, Daniel stood and grabbed his hat from the counter. I've got chores to do, he said. You're welcome to rest. Or, if you feel up to it, you can walk around. Just stay clear of the back pasture. Fence needs fixing. I can help, Clara said quickly. He studied her for a moment. You ever worked on a ranch? She shook her head. He gave a small nod. Then today you learn. There was no teasing in his voice. No doubt. Just a simple decision. Outside, the air was crisp and fresh. Clara stepped carefully across the porch and down onto the grass. The ground felt different from the city sidewalks she was used to. Softer. Real. Daniel handed her a small bucket filled with feed. Start with the chickens, he said, pointing toward a fenced area near the barn. They're loud but harmless. Clara walked toward the coop, feeling slightly unsure. The chickens began clucking loudly as she approached. For a second, she almost stepped back. They just want breakfast, Daniel called from behind her. She took a breath and opened the small gate. The chickens moved around her quickly, but not in a frightening way. She scattered the feed carefully, watching how they pecked at the ground. It was simple work, but it made her feel useful. After that, Daniel showed her how to refill the water trough near the fence. The bucket felt heavy in her hands, but she didn't complain. Sweat formed along her forehead, and strands of hair slipped loose from her tie. You don't have to prove anything, Daniel said quietly as he adjusted a wooden post nearby. I'm not, she replied. But maybe she was. Maybe she needed to prove to herself that she was not weak. The morning moved slowly but steadily. She followed Daniel from task to task, watching carefully. He explained things in simple words. How to check a fence line. How to move calmly around horses so they wouldn't get nervous. How to notice small changes in the sky that might signal weather shifts. He never raised his voice, never rushed her. When she hesitated near one of the horses, he stepped beside her. Hold your hand out slowly, he instructed. She did. The horse sniffed her palm before gently nudging it. Clara let out a small surprised laugh. That's Daisy, Daniel said. She likes people who move calm. Clara stroked the horse's neck carefully. The warmth of the animal under her hand felt grounding. Solid. She trusts you, Daniel added. Clara swallowed. Animals don't judge. They don't. Around midday, they sat on overturned buckets near the barn to rest. Daniel handed her a bottle of water. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, he said after a long silence. But if you're running from something, it helps to stop running eventually. I'm not running, she said quietly. He didn't argue. After a moment, she added, I just needed to leave. That's fair, he replied. The simple acceptance in his voice made her chest tighten. She wasn't used to being believed without question. They sat there in silence, watching the wind move through the tall grass. Clara realized something important in that moment. The quiet here did not feel heavy. It felt safe. Later that afternoon, Daniel handed her a brush near the stable. Think you can help with this? He asked. She nodded. Standing beside Daisy again, she gently brushed the horse's coat the way Daniel had shown her. Slow strokes. Steady pressure. The rhythm became calming. As she worked, her thoughts slowed too. Back in the city, her mind had always raced, always alert, always preparing for the next harsh word or cold look. Here there was space between thoughts, space to breathe. Daniel watched her for a moment before returning to his own tasks. He didn't hover. He didn't treat her like she was fragile glass. That meant more than he probably knew. By evening, her arms were sore and her boots dusty. But when they walked back toward the house, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. Inside, Daniel prepared a simple dinner. She offered to help without being asked. He handed her a knife and vegetables. Cut them small, he said. She did. As they worked side by side, she finally spoke without being prompted. My mom used to cook like this, she said softly. Nothing fancy. Just warm. She used to say that home isn't about walls, Clara continued. It's about how you feel inside them. And how'd you feel? He asked gently. She paused. For a while, safe, she answered honestly. After she was gone, not so much. Daniel nodded once, as if he understood more than she had explained. You don't have to decide anything today, he said after a moment. Stay as long as you need to figure out your next step. She looked at him carefully. Why are you so calm? She asked. He gave a small shrug. Getting angry doesn't fix much, and everyone deserves a fair start. A fair start. The words stayed with her long after dinner ended. That night, as she lay in the guest room again, her muscles aching in a good way, she stared at the ceiling and thought about the day. She had fed chickens, brushed a horse, carried water, cooked dinner, simple things. But for the first time in months, she had moved through a full day without fear pressing against her chest. She still didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She still didn't know if she truly belonged here. But something had changed. The terrified girl who stepped off the bus felt slightly different now. Still cautious, still unsure, but no longer completely lost. Outside, the ranch settled into the quiet rhythm of night, and inside the small guest room, Clara allowed herself to believe that maybe healing didn't have to happen all at once. Maybe it could begin with small mornings, and simple work, and one steady voice that never made her feel small. The days on the ranch began to follow a steady rhythm. Morning light through the window, the sound of boots on the porch, the soft hum of wind moving through open land. Clara slowly grew used to it, yet a small part of her still felt like a visitor. 3 weeks of early mornings, 3 weeks of learning how to mend fences, brush horses, and cook simple meals without burning them. 3 weeks of quiet dinners and short conversations that somehow meant more than long speeches ever could. And yet, every night before sleeping, one thought returned. This isn't permanent. Clara kept reminding herself that she was only staying until she figured things out. She told herself not to grow too comfortable, not to lean too much on the peace she had found here, because peace, in her experience, never lasted long. One afternoon, while Daniel was repairing a section of fence near the back pasture, Clara stood watching him hammer a loose board back into place. The sun was warm, but not harsh. The horses grazed nearby, calm and steady. You're holding that nail wrong, Daniel said without looking up. She blinked. I am? He handed her the hammer. Here. Try again. Grip it, lower. She adjusted her hold and tried once more. The hammer hit straighter this time. Better, he said. She felt a small spark of pride, not because she had done something impressive, but because someone had corrected her without making her feel foolish. That evening, while they were eating dinner, Clara found herself studying the walls of the house. Old photographs hung in simple wooden frames, a younger Daniel standing beside a woman with kind eyes. A picture of a small boy holding a fishing rod, another of 3 people sitting on the same porch many years ago. Your family? She asked quietly. Daniel followed her gaze. My wife, he said calmly, and my son. They don't live here anymore, he added. She waited. My wife passed away years back. My boy lives in another state now. Got his own life. Just acceptance. I'm sorry, Clara said softly. He nodded once. Life changes. You learn to adjust. She understood that more than she wished she did. That night, long after Daniel had gone to bed, Clara sat alone at the small kitchen table. A single lamp cast a soft glow around her. In front of her lay the photo she carried in her bag, her mother smiling gently at the camera. I'm trying, she whispered to the quiet room. She wanted to believe she deserved this calm life, but doubt still sat heavy inside her chest. The next morning she woke with a decision already forming in her mind. She could not stay forever. After breakfast, while Daniel cleaned his coffee cup at the sink, she spoke. I should probably start looking for work in town, she said, keeping her voice steady. He dried his hand slowly before turning toward her. That's so. Yes, I can't just stay here without a plan. Not suspicious, not upset, just thoughtful. Having a plan is good, he said, but don't rush yourself out the door either. She swallowed. I don't want to be a burden. Daniel set the towel down. You haven't been one, he replied firmly. She shook her head slightly. You gave me a place to stay. Food. Work to learn. That's more than enough. And you've helped every day, he said. This place runs smoother with 2 pairs of hands. She looked down at the wooden floor. Still. Later that afternoon, Clara walked alone toward the edge of the property. The dirt road that led to town looked long and uncertain. She imagined herself walking it with her small bag again, searching for a job, maybe renting a tiny room somewhere, starting from nothing. The thought scared her, not because of hard work, She was not afraid of that anymore, but because she feared losing the only place that had felt safe in years. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Daniel stopped a few feet away, giving her space. "You thinking of leaving?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Why?" She hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Because good things don't usually last for me." He was quiet for a moment. "That's not a reason," he said calmly. "It is for me." She didn't brush it away. "I keep waiting for something to change," she admitted. "For you to decide I've stayed too long, or that I don't belong here." Daniel took a slow breath. "Clara," he said, using her name in a steady voice, "this isn't a hotel, and it's not a favor." She frowned slightly, confused. "I asked you to stay because you needed somewhere steady," he continued. "And because this place has been quiet for too long." Her chest tightened. "I don't want to take your family's place," she whispered. He stepped closer, but still careful not to overwhelm her. "No one takes someone else's place," he said. "Life just grows around the space that's left." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She hated crying. It made her feel weak, but these tears felt different. "They never wanted me there," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "After my mom was gone, I was just there, in the way." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained calm. "You're not in the way here." "I don't know how to belong anywhere," she confessed. There it was, the truth she had been carrying. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and did something unexpected. He pulled her into a firm, steady hug. Not sudden, not overwhelming, just strong enough to feel solid. Clara froze at first. Her body tensed, old habits rising quickly. But his hold did not tighten in a way that frightened her. It was steady, grounded, protective without pressure. She slowly allowed herself to relax. And then, in a voice rough from years of wind and sun, he said the words that broke something open inside her. "You're home." 2 simple words, but they carried weight. Home. Not shelter. Not temporary. Home. Her breath caught in her throat. The tears that followed were quiet, but unstoppable. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to hear that until that very moment. No one had said those words to her in years. No one had claimed her presence as something welcome. Daniel did not rush her. He did not step back too quickly. He simply stood there, letting her feel safe in the space between them. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were red but clearer than before. "I don't know how to be someone's family," she admitted softly. "You already are," he replied. She looked at him, searching for doubt. There was none. Only steady truth. For the first time since stepping off that bus, Clara stopped thinking about where she would run next. Maybe she didn't need to run anymore. Maybe belonging was not something you earned through perfection. Maybe it was something given freely when someone saw you and decided you mattered. The wind moved gently through the tall grass around them. And for the first time, in a very long time, Clara allowed herself to believe that she was not unwanted. She was not temporary. She was not in the way.